science fiction, a genre that not only imagines the future but also offers profound insights into our future.
Science fiction is much more than futuristic technology and interstellar adventures. It is deeply intertwined with philosophy, culture, and social commentary. In India, where mythology and science often overlap, the genre has developed a distinct and fascinating identity.
We are fortunate to have with us a distinguished panel of experts who have significantly contributed to Indian science fiction. First, it is our honor to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, Dr. Urvashi Kuhar.
We are delighted to welcome Dr. Arvind Mishra, the founding General Secretary of the Indian Science Fiction Writers Association, whose pioneering efforts have played a crucial role in shaping the genre in India.
Sir, please join us.
We are equally delighted to have Ms. Archana Mirajkar, an Indian science fiction writer and senior communications officer at the High Commission of Canada, who brings a distinctive global perspective to our discussion.
Next, we have Dr. Sami Ahmed Khan, an award winning author and academic whose work explores the intersection of science fiction, technology, and social issues.
And finally, we welcome Ms. Pragya Gautam, a prolific science fiction writer known for pushing creative and intellectual boundaries through her thought provoking narratives.
With that, let's begin. I now invite Dr. Urvashi Kuhar to take over as our moderator and lead today's conversation.
Good morning to each one of you. And nonetheless, I'm extremely delighted to have these panelists amongst us, and with a very, very humble introduction that they've allowed us to give to keep it as brief as possible. I'm also not going to add much to it, but to the fact that I'm really looking forward to the very interesting and explorative discussion that we're going to have, which I would also like the audience to uh, take notes of, take heed of, and also participate with us, because your opinion and your input and whatever questions you have make a lot of contribution. It makes a lot of sense, and we need that, and that is why we are all here for. It's called a panel discussion, and we are all going to contribute to it in our own possible ways, which also means that you are here to stay alert, awake, and also, take account of the luminaries that we have amongst us. And it's not easy to find such a remarkable set of panelists all together, and also available at the same time. They've made out, they've taken out time from their busy schedules, and they're here to speak to us and speak to you, and talk about a number of relevant issues with respect to the field of Indian science fiction. I mean, when you hear the name Indian science fiction, or most of you would say, well, it's science fiction. What do you mean by Indian? Well, it is Indian. It is written in India, written by Indian writers. It has a lot to do with the Indian soil. Yet, the issues and the themes are very, very relevant. They're very, of course, pertaining to the Indian subcontinent, the Indian mainland, but also very, very global. So, those of you who are interested in life, I'd say, if you're interested in staying alive, you should know about science fiction, because it talks about the future. It talks about how things come about when we take certain actions, and I do talk about such things in my class, so my students would know, so that what are the repercussions of our acts, and how we are actually playing havoc with the climate, and so on and so forth, and how AI is so beneficial. I mean, it's so helpful also. I mean, it amuses me to see very grammatically correct assignments in papers, and baffles me whether I'm reading it from from my students, or whether, I mean, it is coming from a software. So it does wake me up too. besides that, there are so many benefits of such technologies, and this is what the future holds for us, and this is what we'd like you to participate in and discuss with us and absorb as much of the gyan, the knowledge that our panelists are going to offer to you, and also because they come from different fields of expertise. So this is just the bit I'd like to say, and I would also with that ask Komya how she'd like to take it forward. Else, without much ado, I'd like to request our a stalwart of the area, our expert in the field, Dr. Arvind Mishra, to enlighten us a little bit about the field of Indian science fiction and what he'd like to talk about. We're setting up his PPT, and we'd like to begin the today's program from here, sir. We're of course really fortunate to have you. Sir has traveled all the way from Varanasi just for this day, and just so that he is here to encourage us to talk about this topic. Especially, he was really keen on visiting RLA and talking to our students. So this is a moment to look forward to. Thank you, sir. And also, then, if you're comfortable, you could speak from there itself, because there's a chair we could tilt. And nahi, nahi, sir, you can stand for more than 20-30 hours also, I know that, but just that we have a format of no, I wish I could have sat and spoke. Absolutely, absolutely, sir. Thank you, sir. Please. We'll change the slides. We will do it. So we slide change.
First, I will go informally. I will introduce this. If need be, then I will proceed further. Speaking. That is with you. You can
ठीक है, ठीक है, ठीक है.
let others
ठीक.
speak. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Urvashi. And good morning, friends. And my dear panelists. First of all, I prepared one PPT, but before that, I wanted to interact with you rather informally uh, in an interactive way so that you could understand some basics or some elements of science fiction. What is science fiction? I don't know whether any of you has wondered why this science fiction is being discussed here in Ubiquitous Literary Society, which is a literary society, and why science fiction is being discussed in it. Any of you, if you could answer? I'm eager to know what do you think about it. Why science fiction is being discussed in this literary society? Please come up. I wanted to interact with you, in fact. Anything, any idea comes up on mind, then you are welcome. Okay, friends, science fiction, although this has a word science, but in fact, it is a branch of literature. It is not a branch of science. And one famous science fiction writer, American science fiction writer, uh, he defined science fiction in his own way. And for that matter, there are thousands of definitions of science fiction. If you search it on Google, thousands of science fiction definitions. Everyone tends to give his own definition of science fiction. As soon as he reads it, he involves in it, he gives his own definition of science fiction. And therefore, there are so many disputes, even quarrels between science fiction fans, science fiction enthusiasts about the definition of science fiction. But what definition of science fiction Asimov, the great Asimov, Isaac Asimov gave, that was, the science fiction is the branch of literature which deals with the human reaction towards the changing science and technology. It is your human, a man's reaction towards developing science and technology. What science fiction technology is taking its course, how it could be developed into the future, that is a domain of science fiction writer. For example, I would like to simplify it. For example, when prenatal sex determination was, this technique was discovered by scientists. Science fiction writer later on, they conceptualized a world where female feticide will take place due to this technique being available broadly. And that exactly happened in everywhere in world. Now, we are thankful to India government. It has been banned. Sex determination is banned in India. You see, by mere coming of this technology, it was conjectured by a science fiction writer that this may be misused in future. So, responsibility or this onus is largely on science fiction writer. How he speculates the coming world, the future, how he peeps into the future and writes something fascinating in stories style, that becomes science fiction. Now I would ask, how many of you have read at least single science fiction story? And if you have read it, please try to be very briefly, you could explain about that. I would like to hear from you. Because any one of you have read any science fiction story? I'm not talking about novels, because nowadays, people are reading very, small things and very brief timed things, not the big ones. So I think this event's great success would be lied in you people that do you please start reading science fiction. Unless you start reading science fiction, you cannot be interested to this genre, which has been really very famous abroad. And India, it is coming up, but still things are not very good in India. So, being a student of literature, especially English literature, and there are plethora of science fiction stories, great authors, and you will really enjoy reading those books. Uh, Having said all that, I have one PPT. I think I will go within 5 minutes to take the main things, and I request Urvashi ji to get it circulated among who are interested in the genre after this event. No, just please begin it. Okay, okay. Go ahead. The- So, as I told, science fiction is a genre of fiction in which the stories often tell about science and technology of the future, not the present. SF texts are often set in the future, the extended past, in space, on a different world, or in different universe or dimension. The plot creates situations different from those of the present day and the past. One thing is very important in science fiction. Many of you would have read the social fiction. Definitely, I don't think that you have not read any story in English, not science fiction, any story in English by anyone. Any one of you remember, if you could tell which story you read and of whom, who was the writer? Any one of you? Okay, please. No, I am talking about the story. Which story you have read? Uh, Sultana's. Yeah, that is very famous science fiction. So when I first told, I don't know why didn't you raise your hand that I have read the science fiction story. This first science fiction story from India. What did you like in that story? Okay, do you agree? Swami, you could, explore it, isn't it? Of course, at that time, I don't know, madam would have known even about science fiction. But what critics say that it is a science fiction because it predicted a kind of world where everything is taken in the hands of women and they govern the everything. That is a beautiful story. And uh, the important element of science fiction is that it does not run parallel to your own world. If you are writing a story of your own world, that is not science fiction. Science fiction has to be alternate reality, alternate present, whatever is there, which is not present in your own time. That is science fiction. Please go ahead. Okay, the same thing. Okay, please. It's set in future. Just be brief about few seconds. Hold it. Only few seconds. One term is there, anachronistic, anachronism. Being a students of literature, you would be familiar with this word, anachronism. Uh, but I may tell you, the anachronism is in fact something which does not fit your own world in your own time. Suppose Mahatma Gandhi is depicted talking on mobile phone. That is anachronism because it does not fit to the current settings of the things. So science fiction has to be anachronistic in that way. Okay, please go ahead. It involves imaginations, revolves around accepted scientific findings and facts. In fact, there is no science fiction story without the element of science. If there is no science, it's not science fiction story. Please go ahead. But there are two, sub-genre of science fiction. One is called fiction, and another is called fantasy. Science fiction, there is, restriction that a science fiction writer has to adhere to the real scientific developments, and it has to be woven with the facts and figures of science. Unless if you have wild imagination, uh, traveling through interstellar spaces, that is fantasy, that is not fiction. Asimov has clubbed those genre and said that science fiction is surrealistic fiction, a surrealistic reality, a super reality. That is science fiction. Please go ahead. Advanced technologies, some pictures are there. So, दिखाते चलिए. ये spaceships हैं, time and space travel, aliens. We are familiar about that. Sami has written a beautiful, novel on aliens. Aliens in Delhi. I recommend you all read that novel. That is very interesting. And okay. Yeah, they are themes of the science fiction. Another planet under the oceans, another dimension of existence, maybe a utopia or dystopia. Utopia means in Hindi swarg, and dystopia आप कह सकते हैं नरक. One novel of Brian Aldiss, The Brave New World. That's one of the very famous literature in English. When I first read, I was about 22 years old, and I thought, what a wonderful utopia is this, because there are some kind of things there, soma pills. One people take one pill, that is soma, and see the term was taken from India. Soma, like avatar. Soma, take one pill and everything becomes okay, fully enjoyable, in euphoric state. So I thought that this should be a utopia. Later on, when I started understanding science fiction, I found that it was dystopia, not utopia. Future time travel. uh, in stories, stories, what about this? One very famous writer in Hindi told, he was introducing what is story. First, we have to understand what is story, then we have to go for the science fiction story. Story, what is story? तो उसने कहा कि एक था राजा, एक था रानी, एक थी रानी, मर गया राजा, मर गई रानी, खत्म हुई कहानी। तो इसको आप कहानी कहेंगे? वुड यू कॉल इट स्टोरी? क्यों नहीं कहेंगे? क्वेश्चन स्टार्ट्स फ्रॉम हियर। क्यों नहीं कहेंगे? क्योंकि इट लैक्स प्लॉट। कुछ तो आप बोलिए, राजा कैसा था, रानी कैसी थी, क्या हुआ, कौन सी ऐसी स्थिति आई कि राजा भी मर गया, रानी भी मर गई, तब स्टोरी खत्म होगी। स्टोरी इसके पहले नहीं खत्म हो सकती। तो देयर हैज टू बी सम प्लॉट और some suspense, some elements of suspense for a successful story. Then it becomes a story. तो प्रोटैगनिस्ट एक हीरो होना चाहिए, विलेन हो, और these characters bear a human face, and man has to be in focal theme, in center of the story. Unless we have a man, now it has been very fast, it's being replaced by robots, by AI, which my other fellow experts will speak on that, about the invasion of AIs in our life, not only life, in science fiction also. So, but it has to have a human face. Otherwise, that's not a good story. A protagonist, antagonist, okay, please go ahead. Advanced technology, genetics, disease exploration, special powers or senses, as a result of science. Science can be the savior or the root of the problem. Okay, please go ahead. Jules Verne is a very famous writer. He has written wonderful science fiction. In fact, credit for popularizing science fiction largely goes to Jules Verne. Please go ahead. H.G. Wells is another great science writer who wrote many stories. Mary Shelley is one who is by many authors in the world considered first real science fiction story, and she was only 17 years when she wrote her this novel and completed in a single night itself. She started penning down it, and in morning the novel was finished. And it's a wonderful novel. You should read it. Frankenstein was her. This novel is very famous novel. You all, I strongly recommend that you please read Frankenstein. Themes I have already discussed. Many themes are there. Now AI has also come within the field. Next one, please. Some many themes are there. If you get interested, you will explore yourself. Remember, writers take scientific possibilities and develop them step by step from known data or from a story. From a story. Please carry on. Okay, carry on. Yeah, that's one theme. Psionics developed very popularized by Isaac Asimov, in which some mental powers. Now we would be hearing the mentalism things by mental powers in science fiction, but not validated by science fully. But in science fiction, there are stories of psionics by which you develop some mental power to change the shape of the things, or you just bend. You can bend a spoon by staring on it. Okay, cyberpunk is one another very famous. This William Gibson first gave this term and one novel. Please carry on. Cyborgs, they are very famous, characters in science fiction. Cyborg is one which has, a human and some artificial uh, uh, combining of things, and then becomes cyborg. But most of all, we are all, in some sense, cyborgs. We are wearing this spectacle. We are cyborg. Um we are wearing eyes, lenses. We are cyborg. Okay. Android is half human, half this synthetic material. That's the Android. The latest form of robots. Next, please. Faster than light travel. It's another aspect. Please go ahead. Extrapolation is something which you extrapolate from the today's science to which way it could develop into the future. Next. Science fiction in India, Hindi, Bangla, these are another languages, please. Of course, in English, there are plethora of science fiction writing in Hindi, in English also. Marathi, Tamil, these are the languages where science fiction is being, written in a prominent way. Malayalam, Kannada. Next. Recent trends are there: Marathi, Hindi, Bangla, Kannada. These languages where writers are very active these days. Next. Yeah, thank you very much. There is one blog, India's sci-fi. Just previous one, just previous one. Yeah. The next one, next one. India's sci-fi arvindblogspot.com. You could go over there and read many things about science fiction. Many reviews are there about science fiction novels and all that. Thank you very much, friends. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, not at all. You spoke very timely. In fact, we could have heard more of you, and you know, each bit input from you seems like it's there's so much more to uncover. And sir, before the students, we have a small question. I'm taking an advantage of my situation, but I'd just like to ask you very briefly. About the role of mythology in Indian science fiction, because it's so topical to the Indians that we are most of our discussions, most of our literature, or our whatever we write, and in fact every aspect of our lives is so ingrained with our Indian culture that mythology cannot be divorced from it. So how does Indian mythology impact Indian science fiction? In fact, does it become irrational and at that point of time, because certain facts cannot be explained? So if you could say something about that, please.
Urvashi ji, for that you have to organize at another event to speak on mythology and science.
So
It's a very big
just
subject.
very, very briefly, sir.
And this my weakness to discuss mythology. Although many of my friends, they criticize it, but there is a connection between mythology and science fiction. Some people, very great scientists of the world, science fiction writers of the world, they have said that in fact science fiction is a mythology of tomorrow, or someone has said this mythology of the past, because science fiction uses many imageries, unbelievable kind of imageries, unbelievable kind of characters, and mythology does the same thing. And it's more akin to, I think, science fantasy. And if you would be reading, many people have definitely read the science stories in mythology about Mahabharata, about Ramayana, and see how Lord Ram puts his arrow, and after killing the enemy, it returns back to him, the arrow, the concept, the proto concept of missile. So, on the idea basis, mythology does the same thing exactly as science fiction does, only on the idea level. And the difference is that technology did not exist at time of when our great mythologies were being written. Had their technologies been there, they would have developed into the ideas given by the mythology writers. But as with the coming of the technologies, vis-a-vis, definitely one day we can see a Pushpak Vimana. What was the feature of Pushpak Vimana? Pushpak Viman has a capacity in mythology to accommodate any person, any VVIP coming last. It had always a space available. Suppose someone comes, not some sages, some sage, some Vasish Durvasa was a very angry kind of sage. Suppose he came, okay, sir, welcome. Come to my this is Pushpakman. There is a place for you. No one could be denied. So smart shape kind of development which is taking place in science, and also intelligent machine. It didn't exist. I do say that this was idea only. It didn't exist. But you must admire the sages, the writings, how they wrote such a wonderful thing how they wrote, how they gave such a wonderful idea of an emotional machine. It was it has been very depicted very beautifully in Ramayana when uh, Pushpak Viman, after conquering Lanka, reached to Ayodhya. Lord Rama said that, okay, Pushpak, your role is now over. You can go to, because he was captured by King Ravana, it was taken from the Kuber, the most wealthiest person in the mythology. He said that, your role is over, you go to your master, Kubera. Then he became sad for a while. Rama asked, why you are sad? Sir, I am not only sad, I am both at the same time happy and sad. Happy that I am going back to my master. Sad because I am leaving you. Your separation would be there. That is sad for me. You see, that beautiful thing is depicted in story of Pushpak Vimana. Do you think that could we extrapolate by coming of the science and some technological developments, a Pushpak Viman could come into reality? That is all, Urvashiji, because that's a very long, topic, mythology and science.
Very true, sir. And we could go on and on about this. And like sir said, we'll need a separate workshop to talk about Indian science fiction and its connection with the mythology of our country. But yes, we leave, this much at that. You know how we leave novels open ended or stories open ended for more discussion in the future. But if there's a quick question, we can take one. Otherwise, we'll have it at the end, the Q&A session. Just one question, sir. Yes, please. You can use the mic. Switch it on, please. It's on.
Sir, I do want to ask that what makes psionics exciting for readers in science fiction world?
Please repeat again, I think.
What makes psionics exciting for readers in science fiction world?
Yeah, sure. See, okay, I don't need a mic. It's okay. Uh, that is actually a good question, but then it depends on how you define exciting and how you define readers, because it's a very subjective thing of what psionics is, what it means. I, as a reader, can enjoy it. You, as a reader, might not. So this question of should or can, it's not really it doesn't really work in the context of fiction, right? But if you want to know more about psionics, the classic text is the X Files, for example.
Okay.
So
Right.
just read, sort of watch the series, and because who doesn't like to blow things up with their mind, right? It's a childhood fantasy. I just want to blow this thing up, and it's a part of growing up. Uh, Whether you like it or not, that depends on you as a subject. There's no, a universal general theory that I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much. And with this, we move forward to our next speaker, who's also a fellow academician and writes brilliant Indian science fiction. That is, he's also written about aliens in Delhi, and we get to see so many nowadays. We just don't recognize them. But if you can also put up sir's PPT in the meantime. And we sir has taken out time, like I mentioned. He's busy teaching, he's busy mentoring MA and PhD students in the same time. So we got lucky to have him to come here, and also then uh, you know makes space for inviting him on for future occasions. So he's going to talk about AI and ISF, which is artificial intelligence and Indian science fiction, and that also opens up a lot of ideas and avenues for asking him multiple questions, because I'm also very keen on knowing what specifically he will talk about. Sami, please enlighten us.
Thank you, Urvashi. With your permission, I would like to sort of walk and talk rather than stand and
Absolutely,
talk, right?
please
Because
feel free.
I can't sit still and talk. Uh, this is who I am. So hi, I'm Sami. It's okay. I'm audible, right? Great. Uh, Thank you for having me here. I'm lovely being here with all of you. Keep the subject sort of informal session, so feel free to interrupt me. This is not really a lecture. So whenever you have any questions, just you say, okay. That's perfectly fine. Right? We begin with, am I audible? Am I audible? Yes or no? I think I am. I prefer to speak with So I begin with what we call the bottle experiment. Right? I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence, but before that, I have to talk to you about science fiction. Before I talk to you about science fiction, I need to talk to you about other modes of storytelling that will be available to us as readers, as viewers, etc. etc. So do you guys see this bottle? Yes or no? Yes. This is bottle, right? So I keep this bottle here, and it's kept right here. Okay, fine, fine. Right. Okay. So you see this bottle? It's kept right here. Now, close your eyes for just a second, please. All of you, just close your eyes, please. Now, close your eyes, please. Thank you. Open your eyes. Where's the bottle? Right? What the hell happened here? What just happened? Think about it. If you were, as a researcher, a scholar, an artist, were to be asked about this phenomena, this object moving within the blink of an eye from point A in space-time to point B in space-time, how would you explain it? Teleportation, right? Somebody said that? Great. What else? How do you explain this? How do you explain this phenomena? How do you rationalize it? How do you engage with it? What else? Superposition, right? What else? What else? So you're just thinking science fiction, right? Expand. It's not just science fiction about, it's not just about science fiction now, it's about storytelling. Right? What happens here? Think of the other popular genres that you have engaged with that have a similar phenomena portrayed to you. Magic, absolutely. You know, what else? Right. Now, this is the point I'm trying to make. The lexicon you adopt, the terminology you choose, the vocabulary you deploy, and the vantage point from which you perceive this phenomena and try to rationalize it explains the mode of storytelling. For example, next slide, please. Next, please. This, what is essentially happening is spec-fic. In Harry Potter, if this happens, you say it's apparition. You are apparating from point A to point B, right? Magic, fantasy. If it happens because of the will of a divine being, say Thor, the Bifrost Bridge, it's mythology. But if it happens due to teleportation, matter transport, it's science fiction. So essentially, the same phenomena that you witnessed, when being written about from different perspectives, determine how it's classified, how it's categorized, and how it's labeled, right? Harry Potter has something similar. Thor has something similar. So does Star Trek. What connects all of them? They're all modes of speculative storytelling. And the vocabulary that you use, the perspective you use, it determines what that phenomena is. Following me till now? Is that a yes or a no? Right. Because blank faces are very visible, right? So yes is always nice. Next slide, please. Right. So speculative fiction, fantasy, mythology, science fiction, it isn't just about what happens. Because something similar happens in all of them. You have a bad guy, he has a big powerful machine. You have a good guy who has a not so powerful machine, but he is driven by the forces of good, right? So he wins. But the vocabulary you use, that determines the kind of spec-fic genre you are engaging with. And it is with this kind of understanding that we delve deeper into science fiction itself. Next, please. Thank you. Right. So, as Mishra Saab also talked about, what is the definition of science fiction? There are no definitions. You go online, you have like a million definitions, and all are contradictory. But we don't deal in definitions. However, we should know definitions in order to better them. We don't really believe in the idea of a definition in science fiction, in literature at least. In science you do, but in literature we don't really deal with definitions. We deal with problematizing definitions, right? So Hugo comes back, science fiction is 75% literature, 25% science. Question: if it is 74.9% literature and 25.1% science, is it still science fiction? That's the first response. They're like, so how do you quantify? How do you actually quantify this idea of what is scientific and what is not? Then, Isaac Asimov, the reaction of human beings to changes in science and tech. Brooks Landon, the literature that considers the impact of science and tech on humanity, or the literature of what if. Right? What if? What if this camera right here in front of me were to turn into a dinosaur? That would be nice, no? That's actually a good story right there. Suddenly you have a T-Rex in the middle of you, looking here and there for prey and food. I hope that doesn't happen, but if it happens, it's a great story or a great film, right? Next, please. Right. So since we talk about AI, we talked about spec fic, we talked about science fiction. Now we can actually talk about AI. Now, disclaimer: I come to AI from the perspective of science fiction and not from the perspective of science. Right? I'm not a scientist. I'm not. But I have read enough science fiction to know that AI is horrible. And I'm not talking about the assignments that you guys submit using chat GPTs. I'm actually talking about films, novels, web series that talk about the deployment and the perfection of AI in our market and the impact that has on our societies, our communities, our ways of thought, our behavior, right? So just ask yourself these very sort of this battery of questions: that what makes something sentient? What makes something alive? What makes you classify or categorize something as, aha, this thing is alive, this thing lives? You must have seen this famous meme from Frankenstein saying it's alive, right? Right? So why that it's alive? Why are we so fascinated with the idea of what life is? Secondly, how does AI actually come into being? How does it come into being? When do you draw a line between a pure line of code that is just a code and then a sentient entity? Where do you draw this line? That 10 lines of code, suddenly they are sentient. Suddenly they are self-aware. How, and where do you draw this line? Third question: if AI actually comes into being, what impact would it have on our world? This is a very difficult question to answer because it's also a very scary question to answer. We think we are the best because we are human beings, right? Suddenly, you have something that is better than you in every way possible. Something that regards you as literally an infection on this planet, right? Organic infection, carbon based infection. What happens then? And how would an AI, this kind of AI, affect my behavior? How would an AI change the society around me? And then what is our future within this kind of a world, right? So, very weird questions, I call them, because they don't have answers. They just leave us with scary thoughts. But that's what we do. That's what science fiction does. It makes you ask these questions. It makes you engage with the idea of what is real, what is not real, what is feasible, what is not feasible, what is going to happen in the future. And that is why I would suggest, as Mishra Saab was also talking about, find your own kind of science fiction that speaks to you, because science fiction is actually a spectrum. You have the absolutely pulpy, trashy, weird kind of science fiction, and you have the aesthetic, political, layered, dense, beautiful kind of science fiction. You choose what speaks to you. There is no one kind of science fiction that you're going to love. You're going to hate some of it. You're going to love some of it. The point is, find what you hate, find what you love. As simple as that. Right? Next slide, please. So, a few examples of science fiction across global science fiction. I'm sure you've heard of HAL, 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? If you've heard of this, I'm sorry, David, I can't open the door. That kind of thing, that very creepy, calm voice that tells you, I'm going to shut you out of the spaceship because you're no longer required. If you haven't seen this film, read the novel, so this is classic Kubrick, by the way. 1968, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I suggest you watch it if you're into AI. Again, Terminator. Now, I grew up in the 90s on Terminator, so no wonder I'm so freaked out by what AI is, right? If you haven't seen Terminator, please do. Replicants, Blade Runner, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? You've heard of this, right? And then, of course, any gamers here? Gamers? FPS gamers here? No gamers here. Seriously, guys, come on. Yeah, so if you're into FPS, first person shooter, Halo has Master Chief, Master Chief has Cortana, the AI, which now finds its way on your laptops, your Windows laptops, if you know, right? Uh, Next slide, please. And then some examples from Indian science fiction, right, which I suggest you engage with if you want. Yandran and 2.0. As Shankar, you know this. You do know this, right? If you don't know this, if you don't know about the greatest superstar to ever live in the history of human civilization, then I suggest you go and watch this film as soon as possible. These films, in fact. Talking about, I'm talking about Rajnikant, the greatest human being to have ever lived. So please go and see these films and look at the mediums and the languages. Films in Tamil. Then you have Dome Child, the novel in English by Shiv Ramdas, talks about an AI. OK Computer talks about a web series in Hindi, directed by Pooja Shetty. Ravan film by Anubhav Sinha in Hindi. One more example, Interface, short story, Manjula Padmanabhan, English, right? So you have a rough list of texts across mediums and languages which are recent. Like these are all, I think, over the last decade, I think. Yeah, right? So next, please. So I end with this. I end with this very seemingly simple question, right? If you have to talk about the present and the future of AI in India and its science fiction, then first you have to determine what is your vantage point. Do you see this as a question of technology, as engineers and scientists do? Is this a question of tech, about how to code better, how to make something learn from large language models, how to make something learn from big data, how to make something evolve out of nothing, how to make something recognize your accent, right? Is this a question of technology? Or is this a question that is political? Once you have an AI, how do you deploy it in the market? Which market? For whom? Who's your target group? How do you plan to monetize it? What is the political impact of the deployment of AI on societies and communities and nations, right? Or is this a literary or cultural question? That, well, we have this novel, we have that novel, we have that film. Or is this a philosophical question? What it means to be AI? Because when you ask yourself what it means to be AI, it's the surest way of asking what it means to be human. Because you define AI as something that isn't really human. And you assume that human beings are organic, natural intelligences. Who knows? We may have been created by somebody or something out there as AIs. And now we have created our own AIs. And then the cycle goes on and on and on. So it's a very fascinating question. And again, I end with the ethical and moral dimensions of AI. So if an AI is to be perfected tomorrow, and the AI says, I was coded to save this planet. That is the purpose of my existence. And suddenly the AI pursues through all the data that is available to that particular AI, big data, right? And that AI finds that, okay, if I have to save this planet, the biggest threat to this planet is what then? Right? So how do you program ethics into an AI? How do you prevent an AI from turning into a genocidal, maniac that says, okay, I have to save this planet. The only way to save this planet is to eradicate the things that call themselves human, right? So this is what I'm talking about. Science fiction engages with these questions, right? It is exact, and not just them, but there are some of the questions that science fiction actively engages with. They may give it to you as pulp, as just sort of spectacles and SFX, and stuff like that. But if you delve deeper into the plot, the narrative, the storyline, the characters, and what they're trying to say, you would peel the layers of the text and reach these questions. And engaging with these questions is the fun part. So don't see science fiction as an end. Science fiction is a means to question our external reality. And it's a great way, but it's not the only way. So you choose what works for you. And I'm sure you'll have a great time discussing science fiction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sami. This was extremely engaging, interesting, and taught us a good deal about different aspects of AI and society. And